We're entering a very, very challenging, difficult time with visual technology. And I think art and artists, we're going to play an important role here. What is truth?
In this episode, I have a conversation with Joel Nickel, a retired Lutheran pastor who served in parishes in Detroit, Michigan, Chicago and Champaign, Illinois, and Stayton, Oregon for a total of 45 years, and also who has been an artist for just about as long as he can remember. This is Deep Dive Worship, exploring creative works by creative people who honor our creative God. Let's dive in. Hi, I'm David McGinnis. Thank you for joining me today. In this episode, I flip my mission statement of exploring creative works by creative people to really focusing in on a creative person who is doing some artistic creative work that honors our creative God. But before we do that, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel or to my Rumble channel. Hit that subscription button, hit that follow button, ring that bell, whatever button you see on the screen, do something with that. That would really encourage me and encourage this whole creative endeavor. So now, without any further ado, here's that interview with Joel Nickel. Enjoy. First of all, thank you for sitting down with me and talking about your artwork and worship and how the two are related. Let's begin with a brief overview of your ministry.
Well, it's been a journey, and as I look at my journey from the parishes I served, I started out in Detroit, Michigan, in inner city, and then Chicago, south side of Chicago, in the black community with a parish. And so I come at this, church work with the social conscience, that has been developed through experience.
Yeah.
And I spent time as a campus pastor at the University of Illinois, and then ran afoul of church authorities who didn't like the fact that I was ecumenical. And so I came to Oregon, things have blossomed here. I've been in Oregon half my lifetime.
Yeah.
And so along the way, going to art school in Chicago and going to art school here in Portland, and then learning the techniques of enameling. It's been a journey that I reflect on. The Lord puts you in callings that maybe challenge your comfort zone, but that is good.
Yeah.
You want to be challenged,
yeah.
And so that you don't sit back and rest on your laurels.
Right.
I always said, to other preachers, you're only as good as last Sunday's sermon.
That's true.
And really, the work of ministry happens on Monday through Saturday.
Yeah.
That's when you care for people,
yeah.
and people care for each other, and you seek the common good of the community. And then you come back and get refreshed through the biblical references and worship.
Right.
The same thing was true with artwork. Sometimes I had to go do the gallery rounds up in Portland. Just to go visit different galleries to see what other artists were doing. It was very, very important. I appreciate all the different styles. I'm not a realist, but I appreciate those that can do that style well.
Yeah. And speaking of styles, talk about how you developed your own style of creating artwork.
My interest in the visual communication required me to go to art school. And I was serving a parish in Chicago at the time, and so I went to the Chicago Academy of Fine Art, which was at the time the Poor Man's Art Institute school. And they would take me on as a part-time student, and that was just fine. I could work as well as do art, and that's really where I got started. Most important class I had was called Materials and Techniques. And we were dealing with different media and different styles of art. When I came to Oregon in 1978, by the end of the 80s, I realized I needed to go back to art school. So I went to Oregon School of Arts and Crafts, and there I was a part-time student again because I was working full-time. I was in their metal studio because I was, working with the silver and copper and brass in creating artwork. And so over the long haul, it was putting together the visual and the verbal. The right side of the brain, the left side of the brain, the logical and the intuitive into one. I find that was kind of the background of my challenge. My style could be called abstract geometric. So I'm interested in color and form. And this is a painting. It's a thing in itself. I tell people we live in an asymmetrical world, and the part of the challenge is to create a sense of balance and harmony. Using shapes that are moving all over the place, different colors. Obviously, the colors are complementary. There are 9 shapes in that painting. Each one is different. The colors are similar. You get a sense of the overall balance of the total painting. The medium in that painting is gouache, which is an opaque watercolor.
And how does a painting like the one we're looking at go from a conception, an inspiration in your mind, to putting it on a canvas?
I work with a sketchbook. I draw forms. I find that the circle, the square, the triangle, and then the odd forms that bulge and the shape shifts. Putting all that down on paper in a sketchbook, then I translate that to a sheet of watercolor paper, 22 by 30 inch sheet of paper. Draw it out, try to get things to land where I think they should be, and then start painting. And I find that oftentimes I think I'm finished with the painting and it doesn't look right. There's something else has to be added. That painting right there on the wall, the blue color was added later. Because it didn't have the kind of movement and luminosity that I was interested in. And just by adding that light blue color, everything ties together better and has some depth.
Okay.
So that's the kind of the process that I use from sketchbook, thinking about different shapes and their relationship. I have a sketch here called Triangularity, which is a battle of the triangles pointing in different directions. And if you think about life itself, especially on I-5, we have all these moving parts that, create a bit of tension and anxiety in life. Mm-hmm. And with artwork, I'm interested in picturing some of those pointed, jagged pieces, but then try to find harmony so that we can function within the visual world.
Yeah, okay. Are there artists that you draw inspiration from?
I grew up in Chicago, and oftentimes our family would go down to the downtown area, the Loop in Chicago, go to the Art Institute. And my parents, they loved the French Impressionists, and they went to that gallery right away. But my younger brother, Jim, who's an artist in New York, he and we would go to see Picasso and Matisse. Okay, and that says something about two generations and the visual inspiration that they got. We found that Picasso and Matisse, they were dealing with expressionistic color, the color that comes from the inside, from a sense of feeling, and there's some symbolism. Red is hot, blue is cool, green is growth. You associate colors with different elements in the physical world. But Picasso's distortion of form, and Matisse's color, and both of them, the line that they used, it was just very powerful. So I think I started out wanting to be an expressionist. But I found that I was led more into the abstract art form, art style. And then there were a whole host of artists there that I appreciated. Richard Diebenkorn he died in the early 90s. He's a Southern California artist who looked at the environment in which he lived and basically abstracted some of the forms. And he's the heir apparent to Matisse in terms of color. And so I learned a lot from looking at Diebenkorn's work. Well, that's kind of how my style evolved into more of a geometric abstraction. But interested in color and form, and the colors are opaque. They're on the surface. That's just the way I paint, I guess. I'm an opaque person. I'm not transparent.
You work in other mediums. Talk about the artwork that you create when you use glass and metal.
This is, it's cloisonné enameling. One of the art schools I went to, the Oregon School of Arts and Crafts, unfortunately no longer in existence, but it was a great school. And I was in the metals department because I was working with copper and silver and brass. And then one summer I took an enameling workshop with Jean Tudor, who's internationally known, at the Grunewald Guild, which is an artist retreat center up in Washington. And what enameling does, enamel is glass. It's glass on metal. There's a copper sandwich in the middle. Enamel goes on both sides, the back and the front. What gives it the title cloisonné are the silver wires that separate the colors. And so this is cloisonné enameling. Each piece has to be fired 5 or 6 times. You got to put the enamel on the back, on the front, then you got to put the wires down, and then the color inside, and then you've got to smooth it out, and it's a labor-intensive process. This is a crucifixion. The cross has deep meaning, and it's paradoxical because it's a picture of pain. Crucifixion was extremely painful. It was deadly, and yet it also is a symbol of life and the peace of God that comes through human suffering. And so this it's a picture of Jesus being impaled as well as being a symbol of freedom. The cross is paradoxical. This would be a Pentecost cross, a lot of red, where the Spirit is present in some of the forms, centered again in the cross at the center. And I've worked with silver. I don't know if this will show up. I love circles. The main circle is a symbol for God, for being without beginning and end. Balanced with the 4 square earth. or a triangular shape. Think of the pyramids as well as the Trinity. And so form has meaning embedded in it as well as color.
So let's talk about how Scripture informs your artwork. What does the relationship between God's Word and your artwork look like?
As a pastor of churches, I'm working with the text of Scripture all the time, and there are certain texts that inspire me. Texts dealing with the Spirit of God, moving over the face of the earth in creation stories. Isaiah says a lot about the Spirit. That we need to take to heart. And of course, Jesus in the Gospel of John says, once I leave you, I'm going to send the Spirit, the Comforter, who will be by your side and give you the insight you need to deal with life.
Yeah.
And I take that to heart. It's kind of like the wings of the Spirit descend on me and they grab me. A lot of times it's difficult to get started, but then you're in the flow and one thing leads to another. One piece inspires the next.
Interesting.
And then the flow ebbs out, and you got to start all over again. So switching media helps me in this restart of the creative process.
Nice. Let me read a quote from you that appears on your website. It says, "Art that maintains a dialogue with religion isn't popular these days. But then much art which is devoid of the spiritual is shallow and trite." Could you expand on that statement?
Okay, I'll talk about the trouble that I've had when I'm doing religious art. Galleries are not interested in showing it because they figure the market isn't there. Churches, I'm out of the Lutheran tradition, and in churches there has been usually an iconoclastic period where images were suspect and the visual arts were suspect.
Yeah, right.
So it's not a problem just in the art world or in the church, but both have issues that impinge upon the kind of art that I do. The other issue in the art world is the difference between fine art and craft. Oftentimes craft is looked down upon, and fine art, of course, is expensive. You think about auction houses auctioning off art for millions, even billions of dollars, and the wealthy use art as their cryptocurrency. And a lot of the work that they buy at auction goes into a warehouse and is never seen again. That's an issue. And so this tension between art and the secular, and the tension that the religious focus has in a secular world, is something that is abiding, and it depends on where you are as an artist and the kind of work that you're doing. But from a religious standpoint, there has been iconoclasm that in the church you've got to deal with, and in the general culture, secularity has taken over, so that religious issues are no longer worthy of the marketplace. I think, though, that all work is I should say, excellent work has a spiritual content.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be religiously focused, but anything that enlivens the human spirit, that helps us to deal with all the brutal stuff that's going on in our world. The warfare that seems to be consistent.
Yeah.
artwork can improve the spiritual sense that we have of the need for peace, and give encouragement to people working for peace.
Yeah. When you create a piece of artwork, is there a message that you want that artwork to convey? Is there a message that you want the observer to walk away with? Or do you simply let the artwork speak for itself?
Well, it depends in part on what I'm making the art for.
Okay.
Okay, what is the setting in which it will be? If it's going to be in a gallery someplace or in a church someplace, there are two different locales.
Okay.
And so it's going to shift with that. Sometimes the message is direct. A lot of times I'll use collage and actually have printed words, okay. Sometimes those printed words are in the painting itself,
Yeah.
Tear apart the heavens and come down,
Okay. Yeah.
And at other times, especially in the abstract work, it is, what does this make you feel like? What ideas strike you when you see this? Yeah. What connections does the viewer make as a really completing the artwork? The artwork is there, you see it, but what does that effect does that have on you, and what connections does that make? Is it encouraging? I would like to think that my artwork encourages people.
Yeah.
Whether it was with a more direct message or with the subtle use of form and color.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if I'm starting off with a biblical text, then the meaning is pretty direct.
Okay. Yeah.
But if I'm starting off with squares and circles and reshaping forms, then it's more subtle.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place for both.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about how people can appreciate art. What are your thoughts when it comes to art appreciation?
Let's picture you going into a museum in a room that's filled with art. And I would tell people, make a circle around the room and look at each piece. And then ask yourself which piece, close your eyes and say, which piece strikes you the most in terms of what you remember. Then go back to that piece and do what we call close looking. Really look at how do the colors work? How do the shapes work? What is this saying to you? And spend time with it. I've seen figures that when people go through a museum, they spend 15 seconds with each piece, which is not close looking at all. And art appreciation grows when you are able to do close looking at the pieces that initially spur you on with some sort of inspiration. So, close looking is really important. With my own work, some of the forms, the lines are very subtle. You don't see them at first, mm-hmm. Because they're in the same intensity range in terms of the light. And you've got to take some time with art. Art appreciation. And I must say that when I'm working in my studio, I usually have music being played. I've got a stack of CDs that I'm playing all the time, whether classical or jazz, mostly jazz actually. Mm-hmm. And that's very important to me, the sound that music creates. It's a different kind of medium. It hits the ears where artwork hits the eyes. Yeah. And what has happened, now this is going back to my preaching, preaching, it proclaims something to the ear, but our society has exchanged an ear for an eye. And communication happens in our world through what we see, mm-hmm. primarily. What we hear, we tune out because the babble of voices is so strong.
Yeah.
And it's what we see. There is such a thing. Jesus deals with this. Why does he teach people with using parables?
Right.
Well, so that seeing they will not perceive, and hearing they will not understand. That sounds really strange, but seeing, they have willful blindness that prevents perceiving anything deep. And with the hearing, willful deafness means I don't want to hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't want to contend with this. And so the problem that Jesus faced was, where do you find an appreciative audience that is going to follow you?
Yeah.
And so seeing and hearing are very important. I think in our society, seeing has really become almost more important than hearing. And, that old adage, what you see is what you get, gets curtailed somewhat in the, how video now can be changed. A photograph can be changed completely. We can have pictures of people that are doing and saying things that they in person would never do.
Yeah.
Because we can imitate through what you see. We're entering a very, very challenging, difficult time with visual technology. And I think art and artists, we're going to play an important role here. What is truth? You see, the New Testament, if you go through a concordance, you would find that the word for beauty or beautiful, just a few references, but the reference to truth, you go through pages and pages.
Yes. So
that in the New Testament at least, beauty is really truth. These three transcendents, the good, the true, and the beautiful, are all three certainly important, and God is the absolute truth, absolute beauty, and absolute goodness, and we are called to do good to all, working for the common good. I would hope artists are tuned into that. I think they are.
Yeah.
Working for the common good of society. And you can take on all sorts of issues against the bullies. The playground bullies out there that are waging war and destruction and the like, so that the strong oppress the weak. And consistently, the Bible says, no, you protect the weak against the strong. You feed the hungry against those who are well-fed. So that there is that prophetic tension always that art can depict. And so I think we're entering a very challenging era, and I would like to live another 30 years to see that, but that's not going to happen.
This episode was written by David McGinnis, videography and editing by David McGinnis, special guest Joel Nickel, art images created and produced by Joel Nickel, music provided by Storyblocks.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, let me know by subscribing to Deep Dive Worship and leaving a comment. Deep Dive Worship is available wherever you listen to or watch your favorite podcast. This is a David McGinnis Films production, copyright 2023.